this, so I can just put it on the music stand, it lights up the music.
Here.
Sure.
Sure.
You have number 5, yes?
5, yeah, I got it.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm writing these papers on consciousness and that they're mistaking awareness and so forth for consciousness, and it's two different things, and I wrote that in my paper.
They don't have any more.
And I opened a book written by Anik Gamaswamy, and at the end of his,
I don't
one
have
of
any more.
his chapters, he said, and there's a difference between awareness and consciousness, and I thought, yes, I already wrote
Here they
that.
are.
I'm doing that.
Ouch.
See, they call everything consciousness, when actually
3.
consciousness is the overarching etheric consciousness, not us being awake.
I wonder.
But what they're
What?
discovering is that there are people
wonder what?
who are
I was trying to pull
comatose
the
or
chair
they're
up,
in
but the leg of
brain
the chair
dead
is up
or
against the leg of
vegetative
the
state.
table.
That makes a
They're
difference.
discovering that they are still conscious, even though they can't respond in any way. They have the technology now to ask these people a question that they would only know the answer to, and the response is the right answer. But they can't move, open their eyes, or interact with, but the consciousness is there. And
I don't care. I don't want to be in there. I mean, 2 or 3 days, if he hadn't figured out
Oh, I'm sorry.
how to save me, then I'm
I understand.
Because I need to be in the world. I can't be.
that consciousness is eternal life, so
Yeah.
it's never going away.
Yeah, well, yeah, but laying there is different than where I want to end up.
Okay. Yeah, when we see those afterburners going off, oh, you left.
That's right.
Yeah.
He's out of town.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's use our affirmation that we've used the last couple of weeks. Jesus Christ is the head of this class. I am open and receptive to his inspiration and guidance. Together? Jesus Christ is the head of this class. I am open and receptive to his inspiration and guidance. And we give thanks for that guidance and that inspiration, knowing that we are always divinely guided. When we ask, when we seek, we are shown the good that we need to see and know. Father, thank you. Amen.
Amen. This title right here, I just used that in a paper.
It was all written before.
Yeah, in Egypt, yeah,
In
and
Egypt.
I put some of that in a paper that I just wrote.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm putting some of Kuhn's work in there.
Very
and so
good.
forth. Yeah.
But I marked the very bottom 2 lines to start. That's kind of where we left off. Gibbon's harsh judgment was that as long as they are contributed to the glory of the church, this is,
Got it.
yeah. You found the one? It's last week's.
It's last week's.
It's last week's, not the new one I just gave you today. That'll be next.
Wait just a second here.
It's page 57. So that'll be from number 4.
One of these.
Yeah.
Okay.
The number is only on the one page.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Try again.
I swear.
We
If
gotta
I-
get all our paraphernalia going here,
I know.
and I need stronger glasses than what I've got on my face right now.
Okay.
If we had music stands in here, I could bring my light.
Yes.
I'd take it up to the pulpit with me, but there's no place to flip it on.
That light that's on the table over there is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's an high intensity.
Yeah, with this one I have is string of lights,
Mm.
and it just
Which
lights
one
up
of these is it?
everything evenly.
Number
up.
four.
Greatest one.
Huh, number 4, huh?
Number 4.
Yeah. Page 57.
Okay.
There it is.
See, being a good clerk, I try to put everything all in order.
And now it isn't.
Yeah.
These things are hard.
Start from the bottom with 1, so that on the top is the current
Do
one.
your fingers in.
That's,
Yeah, that's,
is that how you did it?
that's what I should have done.
Jeez.
Okay, so we're page 57, bottom of the page. Gibbon's harsh judgment was that as long as they contributed to the glory of the church, the legends and forgeries were lauded by by the mob, welcomed by the hierarchy, and supported by the
Yeah.
dubious evidence
Turn the
of
page,
alleged ecclesiastical history. As a specific example, Gibbon notes in his work Vindication that the 32nd chapter of the 12th book of Anselm, Evangelical Preparation, bears for its title this scandalous proposition, quote, how it may be lawful and fitting to use falsehood as a medicine and for the benefit of those who want to be deceived.
Want to be what?
Deceived.
Lied to.
I didn't bring
Doesn't that kind of make your head twist?
Yes.
How do they know they want to be deceived?
Yeah.
Who told them that?
The greatest preacher of the early church, John Chrysostom, I think it's funny, his name translates as golden mouth.
Golden mouth.
Yeah, who lived from about 347 to 407 and was both Bishop of Constantinople and a famous doctor of the church, observed in his commentary on 1 Corinthians 9, verse 19, quote, great is the force of deceit, provided it's not excited by a treacherous intention. So it's okay to do deceit as long as it's not your intention to be
To
treacherous.
hurt anybody, yeah.
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 I like what Tom has to say here. Few today can read this without some recoil and surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A few Snickers, right?
Somebody take the next paragraph.
Centuries later, even such a distinguished churchman as Cardinal John Henry Newman, in the Apology for his life, appeared to put a stamp of approval on this kind of dishonesty for the glory of the faith. He writes, the Greek fathers thought that when the cause was just, justa causa, and untruth need not be a lie. With such logic, one can justify almost anything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, John Henry Newman. Perhaps you've heard that name before. Was born in 1801, February 21st, and he passed in August 1890 on the 11th. An English theologian, academic, philosopher, historian, writer, and poet. First as an Anglican priest and later as a Catholic priest and cardinal, who was an important and controversial figure in the religious history of England in the 19th century. He was known nationally by the mid-1830s and was canonized as a saint in the Catholic Church in 2019.
Holy cats.
He may lie to you
It's okay though.
about Christianity, but that's okay. He's a saint.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And the word apology is more, it means more like explanation or something like that.
Yes.
It doesn't mean what we think of as apology.
yes.
However, I really do think you ought to apologize.
Oh, man.
So, hey,
When he left the Church of England, he was quickly ordained as a priest and continued as an influential religious leader based in Birmingham. In 1879, he was created a cardinal by Pope Leo XIII in recognition of his service to the cause of the Catholic Church in England. He was instrumental in the founding of the Catholic University of Ireland in 1854, which later became University College Dublin. He was also a literary figure. His major writings include The Tracts for the Times, 1833 to 1841, his autobiography, Apologia Pro Vita Sua,
for my life.
Apology from me.
the apology for your life.
A pox on all of them.
Yeah. The Grammar of Assent, 1870, and the poem The Dream of Gerontius, 1865, which was set to music in 1900 by Edward Elgar, who wrote the popular hymns Lead Kindly Light, Firmly I Believe, and Truly. Praise to the Holiest in the Height. His beatification as a saint was done by Pope Benedict the 16th on 19 September 2010. Well, recently.
Benedict.
Yeah,
didn't like him
Benedict.
anyhow.
He was the German, right?
Yeah, and straight out of the Inquisition
Yeah.
department.
During his visit to the United Kingdom is when he did that. His canonization was officially approved by Pope Francis on 12th February 2019 and took place on 13 October 2019. He is the fifth saint of the City of London after Thomas Becket, born in Cheapside. I guess he couldn't afford the good side. Thomas More, born on Milk Street. Edmund Campion, son of a London bookseller. And Polydore Plaston of Fleet Street. Interesting. There's John Newman.
Who can lie about most everything as long as his intention was good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
justa causa, as long as you have the right cause.
yeah.
This is just a small sampling of a mass of evidence set out by Kuhn and others that the early fathers held it as a distinct proposition that pious frauds were not only justifiable, but even laudable.
Oh, golly.
Yeah,
To enforce their claims to exclusive salvation, they filled all ecclesiastical literature, quote, with the taint of the most unblushing mendacity. Those are lies.
lies.
Where is it? Combated prophecies about Christ by Orpheus and the Sibyls were forged, and, quote, lying wonders, end quote, were multiplied. Heretics had to be convinced, so false interpolations and complete forgeries were made. The whole process continued until eventually the very sense and love of truth, quote, seemed blotted out from the minds of men, end quote. What a mess. As we shall see, even the texts of the evolving New Testament were tampered with.
Indeed, they were. Yeah.
Higgins bluntly declares that every ancient author, without exception, has come to us through the medium of Christian editors who have, quote, either from roguery or folly corrupted them all, end quote. He writes, quote, we know that later in one batch all the fathers of the church and all the gospels were corrected. That is, corrupted by the united exertions of the Roman See. Lanfranc. who became the Archbishop of Canterbury in 1070, and the Benedictine monks of St. Maur. Lovely.
Yeah, those were the editors and the redactors,
Yep.
the New Testament.
Yep.
They just put in their own stuff.
Somebody take the next little paragraph. Well, it's not little, but
It's all right. A similar revision had occurred centuries earlier. Victor Tenunensis, an African bishop of the 6th century, wrote a chronicle ending the year 566. It records that in the year of 506, Constantinople, by order of Emperor Anastasius, the Holy Gospels being written by illiterate evangelists, were censured and corrected.
corrected. I love that word.
Yeah.
Corrected.
One of the church fathers, the Bishop Dionysius, complained that even his own writings had been falsified by apostles of the devil. No wonder, he added, that the scriptures too were falsified by such persons. Even Origen had noted that already the differences between copies of the Gospels in his day were considerable, partly because of the carelessness of individual scribes, but also partly because of the impious audacity of those who added or removed what seemed good to them in the work of correction.
Correction.
Yeah.
Well, that's our Department of Corrections in this country.
Yeah.
Is there any correction going on? No.
No. No.
No.
Amazing. All these years. And the whole doesn't do anything.
It makes it worse.
Seems to.
Yeah. Yes, those are the Department of Corrections, just like this right here, their own
Yeah.
Department of Corrections.
Just imagine masses who walked around thinking it was ought to be and it said just what it should say, the Bible and everything else. And it's amazing. They touched everything.
Oh, yeah.
They
yeah.
they mangled. The next paragraph. Obviously, you have to regard with deep suspicion any group or movement, however noble its declarations, that proceeds to win its case by silencing, excommunicating, or murdering its assumed opponents. Yet most Christians today are totally unaware that church history conceals a of precisely these kinds of tactics by the proponents of what eventually became orthodox creedal belief. What's more, the king of bigoted fury unleashed in the 3rd and 4th centuries against pagans, heretics, and nonconformists of all types set a ruthless precedent for centuries to come. This comparatively modern church historian G.R.S. Mead cites, for example, the burning of the manuscripts of French rabbis during the notorious Inquisition and the vandalism of fanatical crusaders, quote, who left smoldering piles of Hebrew scrolls behind them in their path of blood and fire.
Yeah, and the dead Hebrews along with them.
Yeah,
Yeah, they practiced taking back Jerusalem from Saladin by killing off the Jews on the way down to Israel, to Jerusalem.
Kuhn argues that the official burnings of Hebrew books began at Montpellier, France, in 1233, with the commitment to the flames of all the works of Maimonides, 1135-1204, the renowned Jewish philosopher and theologian. He was good, too. He was very good.
Yeah.
In the same year at Paris, some 12,000 volumes of the Talmud were burned. And in 1244, 18,000 other various works were thrown into fire, he records. That's incredible.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely incredible. Epiphanius, 315 to 403, the rigidly conservative bishop of Salamis, in an attack upon the Sabellian heretics who found they couldn't follow the majority view of the Trinity, wrote that, quote, the whole of their errors they derived from that which is called the gospel of the Egyptians. Kuhn remarks, quote, priceless in value would be that same gospel of the Egyptians if Christian fury had not destroyed it. In other words, that was the real deal. That was the real truth. But they destroyed it. And that was too bad. Another priceless book, The True Logos by Celsus, one of the most noted pagan philosophers of the 2nd century, was likewise burned. The brilliant Gnostic philosopher Basilides, 135 to 150, taught at Alexandria in the second quarter of the 2nd century and claimed to know of a secret tradition transmitted by St. Peter himself. He was highly regarded by so eminent a Christian theologian and church father as Clement of Alexandria, circa 150 to 215. Yet according to Eusebius, his irreplaceable, widely renowned interpretations upon the Gospels in 24 splendid volumes were all burned, quote, by order of the church, end quote.
It's a shame somebody didn't hide some
Yeah.
so we'd know what they said.
And
There-
they may well have, and we haven't found them
And
yet.
we just don't
Because-
know.
Yeah, because that's where they found the Gnostic Gospels and all sorts of things that
Mhm.
were hidden in places for good reason.
And it continues, 36 priceless volumes written by Porphyry, circa 232 to 303. One of the most learned and brilliant minds of his era were destroyed by the church fathers. Porphyry, a Neoplatonist philosopher who could not accept the divinity of Christ and who exposed numerous inconsistencies in the Gospels, had tried official Christianity for a brief time, but found it sadly wanting. 15 of his burned books formed a special series called Against the Christians. Scholars would give a lot to have them now. In his book, Pagan and Christian Creeds, Edward Carpenter, an English philosopher, writes bluntly, quote, the Christian writers not only introduced new doctrines, legends, miracles, and so forth, most of which we can trace to antecedent pagan sources, but they took pains to destroy the pagan records and so obliterate the evidence of their own dishonesty. J.M. Robertson, in Pagan Christs, agrees with Carpenter and gives as an example the treatise of Firmicus, circa 350, which was deliberately mutilated at a passage accusing Christians of following the practice of the widely popular cult of Mithras.
Whoever that was.
Yeah, that somebody take Mithras. Why don't I look? Chapter number 8. Where are the notes? It was all written before in Egypt, 5, 6. How can I look it up when there is no such thing? Duh. Yeah. it goes through up to 6. And then it goes to another section.
Maybe it's in the next section.
Well, I'm in the greatest cover-up of all time. The greatest cover-up of all time. Whoop. Okay, he says for further reading on this, see not only Kuhn, but Mead, Fragments of a Faith Forgotten. No, that's no help. All right, so we'll just move right along with that.
Kuhn is inspiring.
In his expiring but at times difficult tome, yes, it's difficult at times. The Lost Light explains that the story of the destruction of not only books, but also cities, monasteries, and temples, indeed of the early pre-Christian Gaelic civilization in Britain, Ireland, Brittany, and Gaul, is also a sorry narrative of Christian fury. A Christian mob destroyed the Gaulish city of Bibracte in 389, and Alesia was destroyed before that. Bibracte had a sacred Druid college with 40,000 students, and it offered courses in philosophy, literature, grammar, law, medicine, astrology, architecture, and esoteric religion. Arles, with a seat of learning founded 2,000 years BC, was sacked by Christians in 270. These acts of outrage in all probability included the tragic destruction of scrolls and books that might well have completely illumined our understanding of the mysterious rock monuments in Stonehenge. Instead, it today still lies wrapped in a miasma of questions and ignorance. If I take the next one.
The utter destruction of the untold thousands of irreplaceable books and scrolls of the incredible library at Alexandria by a Christian mob stands as perhaps the greatest single testimony to the overwhelming hatred of learning and education held by the rank and file majority who flocked to the new religion. They were looking, as I have already described, for an esoteric or literal religion suited to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Those last 3 words are very telling.
Lowest common denominator. Yeah. This vast store of ancient knowledge, with its museum and the temple of Serapis, the Serapeum, was first established by Ptolemy I, a former boyhood friend of Alexander the Great, and later one of his leading generals between 300 and 290 BCE. It housed priceless classics in every field of human endeavor, from medicine to theology, including works by the great Greek playwrights Euripides, Aeschylus, and Sophocles. It had been partly burned by accident during a punitive attack on the harbor by Julius Caesar in 47 BCE, and it was then targeted for destruction by Emperor Aurelian in the 3rd century. He reigned 270 to 275 CE. In 400, the Serapeum, to which most of the books had by then been moved, was burned to the ground on the orders of Theophilus, the Bishop of Alexandria. Is that the Theophilus from the Bible text? During the time of Paul? I wonder.
That name is in the epistles, but
Yeah. Okay, let's see.
There were riots.
There were riots led by a mob of Christian monks in 415 in the reign of Emperor Theodosius, and with the knowledge or convenience of Bishop Cyril, who had succeeded Theophilus as the patriarch, all that remained of the library, museum, and temple was finally left in smoking ruins.
Good grief. And these
Yeah.
people called themselves.
Civilized? Enlightened?
And my
Christians.
sister wonders why I don't proudly declare myself a Christian.
Yeah.
And I started running over this stuff for her about the Christians do.
Oh,
Jeez.
my word.
Yeah.
But Hypatia's in here.
Yeah.
Tragically.
Tragically, the same mob led by a monk named Peter the Clerk. Not Peter the Great, just
that's
Peter the Clerk.
Distinguished, yeah.
Then attacked and murdered the most brilliant woman philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician of antiquity, the widely renowned
Hypatia.
Hypatia.
Yeah.
The daughter of the distinguished Platonic philosopher Theon and the leading lecturer at the library and museum. Hypatia represented the highest standard of pagan erudition and grace, and was a prime example of the equality of women in the supposedly inferior religion.
Mm-hmm.
She was taken by the mob to a church called the Caesareum, where she was stripped, stoned with roofing tiles, and torn apart. Her flesh was scraped from the bones with oyster shells, and she was then burned at a spot called Cineron.
Oh, gosh.
Socrates Scholasticus, 380 to 450, records in his ecclesiastical history that this happened during Lent, in the 4th year of Cyril's episcopate. Some authorities question whether Cyril was directly involved in Hypatia's death, but he was known to be jealous of her popularity and was a hot foe of anything other than the new Orthodox Christianity or Christianism. Cyril ruthlessly hunted down heretics, pagans, and Jews, looting their homes and possessions. The Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church says that if Cyril didn't order Hypatia's murder, it, quote, was certainly the work of his supporters, end quote. The same source says that whatever one thinks of the, quote, methods adopted, end quote, by Cyril in fighting the perceived enemies of the church, quote, his distinction and ability as a Christian theologian are beyond dispute, end quote. Apparently, you can be a good theologian while acting out the worst kind of violence.
What happened to thou shalt not kill?
Yeah,
That's insanity.
it is insanity. These
Well,
people were
that's,
crazy.
That's in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Incidentally, the Great Library of Alexandria has recently been reopened with great pomp and pageantry, nearly 1,600 years after its destruction.
Hopefully they found some of the old ones buried in the caves around there somewhere to bring back.
All of the mayhem was a further deliberate attempt to blot out all links between the Christian body of doctrine and any pagan material. And at this point in time, I think we probably realize that the pagan material was the true Christian body of
Yeah.
yeah,
The spirituality, the real
the
understanding.
real thing.
Yeah.
They blew up. They burned it. They destroyed it.
Well, the lowest common denominator. So
Exactly. They were
that-
dumber than
that-
dogs.
I know, that applies to the people who did this. They're dumb as a box of rocks.
Yeah. Yeah. The top church authorities were not content with the original specious allegation that Satan had been behind all the amazing resemblances. They often talked of, quote, anticipated plagiarism. end quote, charging that the devil stole the rites, doctrines, and dogmas centuries before they became accepted by the church. So they destroyed, as far as possible, the entire pagan record to obliterate the evidence of their own dishonesty. Whole treatises on Mithraism. You asked about Mithra. Yeah. Well, they're gone. A vigorous rival to early Christianity, were obliterated. The Library of Apollo at Rome was torched and burned to the ground. Commenting on this whole shameful phenomenon, Sir Gilbert Murray, 1866 to 1957, the great classical scholar, said, quote, "The polemic literature of Christianity is loud and triumphant. The books of the pagans have been destroyed." End quote. Rome's emperor, excuse me,
Theodosius
yeah,
the first.
Rome's emperor Theodosius I, who reigned from 379 to 395, had made a number of heresies illegal, and paganism was virtually outlawed. His successor, Theodosius II, promulgated the Theodosian Code, which specifically placed 36 heresies under a total ban and completely anathematized paganism, pagan temples, and astrologers, as well. In 529, Emperor Justinian, in the name of Christianity, finally closed the doors of Plato's famous academy in Athens, put the philosophers to flight, and forced any who failed to escape to be baptized.
And the Platonist people went to Egypt. They escaped, a lot of them escaped to Egypt. I think when Socrates was declared the death sentence and he had to take hemlock, which he did, his students all headed for Egypt because they knew that they were next.
Somebody read the top of page 64.
Okay. There's a blank page there. Kind of threw me off. The church's initial attempts to blame obvious similarities between Christian doctrines and the pagan originals on the work of the devil struck me at first as too outlandish to be believed. Then I read what the otherwise esteemed Christian apologist Justin Martyr had to say about it. He described the Lord's Supper as told in the Gospels and then declared that the wicked devils have imitated it in the mysteries of Mithras, commanding the same things to be done. For that bread and cup of water are placed with certain incantations in the mystic rites of one who is being initiated. You can neither know or learn. Emphasis on original. Tertullian, 160 to 220, originally from North Africa and eventually the first Roman theologian to write in Latin, also said that the devil, by the mysteries of his idols, imitates even the main part of the divine Christian mysteries. He writes, he baptizes his worshippers in water and makes them believe that purifies them from their crimes. Mithras sets his mark on the forehead of his soldiers. He celebrates the offering of bread. He offers an image of the resurrection. He limits his chief priests to a single marriage. He even has his virgins and ascetics. So anything that even sounds like Christianity is work of the devil.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah, anything.
They were nuts. They were absolutely nuts. The concluding proof of the latter medieval and our modern views of Christianity are not identical to those held at the very outset. Lies in the set. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
The concluding proof that the latter medieval and our modern views of Christianity are not identical to those held at the very outset.
Lies.
Outset lies in the sad truth that one of the most influential and most learned of the fathers, a man whose scholarship was central to the early church's self-understanding, was excommunicated as a heretic. It was done within 300 years of his death by a church that had so very quickly lost the light of its original inspiration. Origen, a pupil of St. Clement of Alexandria, believed in the taught reincarnation, karma, and universal salvation as Christian doctrines. He was opposed to a literalist approach to Scripture and to the reduction of the profundities of spiritual truth to the vagaries of simplistic...
Vulgarities.
Oh, yes.
Let's get that one right.
Spiritual truth to the vulgarities of simplistic exotericism. In other words, literalist, common, bottom-line thinking. He paid the price. One of his most significant observations, an observation that the church needs to hear and ponder anew today, was that a literal understanding of a, quote, Christ crucified, end quote, was a doctrine, quote, only fit for children, end quote, in the faith. What I have just documented as concisely as possible is the calculated destruction, corruption, and accompanying cover-up of an ancient, honorable, and highly spiritual religion. It was a crime of major magnitude that the church still refuses to acknowledge, let alone ask divine forgiveness for. The most important thing to remember at this point is that there can be no genuine hope of recovery and renewal for either an individual or an institution without an honest facing up to the past. Sweeping any of this under the carpet of ignorance, excuses, or platitudes can never lead to the healing and the future we all seek. To use again the metaphor I employed at the start, no surgery is ever pleasant, but at times surgery alone holds out the hope of a healthier future for the patient. The hope that still gleams brightly through me, for as I first read about this ominous, dark, and shameful record, was the same light that the prologue to John's Gospel says shines on forever in the darkness, quote, and that the darkness has never succeeded in putting out, end quote. This same light, according to St. Paul, has shone into each of our hearts through the indwelling Spirit of the Christ. That crucial, optimistic part of our story is yet to come.
Oh, there's an optimistic part. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now look at number 5, your new one. Let's just dip our toes in a little bit of it. I like that title. It was all written before in Egypt. Funny that you came up with that.
Yeah. Yeah. The stuff I'm writing is going to just kind of drive my committee crazy, but this is the kind of thing I'm using. Because the last chapter in my dissertation, and they think I don't know, they want me to come up with something new, and I'm thinking, have you read Ecclesiastes? There's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But this is the kind of thing I am using, and the last chapter is, now what do we do with it? How do we live it?
Yeah.
There's nothing in any of the research or anything, psychology or anything else that I've been researching for 2 years that says we ought to live this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm the one who's teaching that at UUMS. That's what my advanced metaphysics course is. How do we live it? And that's why I make them write 900 words a week in the first person. I, me, and mine. No, we, us, and them stuff. And they write that for 40 weeks. By the time they get out of that class, they know what it is to start living it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they keep saying, well, you need to come up with something new, Carol. And I thought, put your seatbelts on, kids.
Yeah. This ancient Egyptian religion.
Yeah.
The quotation from Alvin Boyd Kuhn, his book, Who is the King of Glory? All that went into the making of the Christian historical setup was long pre-extant as something quite other than history, was in fact expressly non-historical in the Egyptian mythology and eschatology. For when the sun at the Easter equinox entered the sign of the fishes, Pisces, about 255 BCE, the Jesus who stands as the founder of Christianity was at least 10,000 years of age and had been traveling hither as the ever-coming one through all preceding time. During those 10,000 years, that same incarnation of the divine ideal in the character of Eusa, or Horus, the coming sun, had saturated the mind of Egypt with its exalting influence. Little did men of that epoch dream that their ideal figure of man's divinity would in time be rendered historical as a man of flesh.
This is in Charles Fillmore's letter to Georgiana Tree West.
This piece,
Well, no.
part of it?
No, but he's saying, she said, who is Jesus really? And he said, the soul that incarnated in the man Jesus came from an advanced life wave and other universes.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the kind of thing he was saying here. Jesus stands as the founder of Christianity. It was at least 10,000 years of age.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And-
Charles Fillmore knew that.
How long is life?
Eternal.
Eternal.
Thank God it's not eternal on the earth.
Yeah. So we come and go,
Yeah.
back and forth
I'm
between
glad we weren't there in some
and the
of these
planet,
times.
and
Yeah.
spirit and the planet. I'm going to sneeze.
Achoo.
That's an interesting piece.
Yeah. And had been traveling hither as the ever-coming one through all preceding time.
Yes.
That's the soul that incarnated in Jesus.
Yeah.
It gives me goosebumps.
Ever coming because
Always.
yeah, it's always available.
Yeah.
Few have figured out where it really is.
Yeah. It's that overarching etheric consciousness that keeps flowing to us and through us all the time.
It started at the bottom of the page. Let's just put our feet in for a little bit. I like Tom's writing. I really do.
It might be easier than Kuhn's.
Absolutely.
You gonna start on that one?
Many of you, if you're like me, have always been intrigued by the mystery surrounding ancient Egypt.
Yeah. Oh.
But the average person won't have a working understanding of Egyptian religion, mostly because the symbolism has often been so poorly explained. Even modern Egyptologists, in their scientific approach, have tended to miss or dismiss its inner meaning. This short account will help the reader to see the background for all that follows.
Like the Christians many millennia later, the ancient Egyptians believed in a God who was self-created, self-existent, immortal, invisible, eternal, omniscient, almighty, and inscrutable. He was the maker of the heavens and the earth, sky and sea, men and women, animals, birds, fish, and creeping things, trees and plants, and the incorporeal beings who were the messengers, angels, that fulfilled his wish and word. The whole of Egyptian religion and theology was based on this belief. One hymn from the pyramid says, quote, "O thou divine child, thou didst create thyself. I am not able to describe thee." In an amazing fashion, this belief persisted from the very beginning. True, a seemingly polytheistic set of ideas and beliefs also was cultivated from time to time, but more as personifications of natural forces and powers, much as in Hinduism. The idea of monotheism, as I read it, was never lost sight of. On the contrary, it has been reproduced in the religious literature of all periods. This is particularly true of the various re-editings of that corpus known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The word used of other deities was not actually our word, God, but neter, a spiritual aspect of the one God. In his work, Egyptian Religion, Sir Wallace Budge, the controversial keeper of Egyptian and Assyrian antiquities in the British Museum a century ago, describes the ancient Egyptian as standing easily, quote, first among the nations in his capacity for development and in his ability for evolving conceptions about God and the future life, which are claimed as the peculiar product of the most cultured nation of our time.
That got buried in Egypt,
Yeah.
you know, and it was Akhenaten who brought back the one God for a while. Unfortunately, he died about 30 years old. But he realized there was one God, and he thought it was the sun, and they called the sun Aten. And so he named himself Akhenaten after the one God. And he took all of the animal stuff out of the Egyptian temples and the cultures and so forth and put the sun, the sun disk, which is you see over the heads of the prophets in the paintings and so forth. And he prevailed for quite a long time. And then he died, and I think the next pharaoh was Ramses II. And that was when Moses was there. And that's where Moses picked up on the one God and brought it to the Hebrews.
Mm-hmm.
Fun stuff.
It is just coming back to me so much. When I was quite young, I was taken to the Cincinnati Art Gallery, which had art and it had other exhibits, including Egyptian. And I was mesmerized by everything that I saw in the Egyptian exhibits. And every time I went back to the museum, that was the place I wanted to go, was the Egyptian portion. There was some draw to all of that. Mm-hmm. And it's been always in my life, draw to the Egyptian. Interesting. Siegfried Morens, in his well-known book, Egyptian Religion, says that in spite of differences, quote, we can speak of an Egyptian religion which has one fundamental point in common with Christianity, the reality of a God who is in man and above men. Nice point. In the light of this present book, what was particularly important was the Egyptian belief in an anthropomorphic divinity, or Christ ideal. Anthropomorphic, God in the fashion. Yeah.
Physical.
Yeah. God looking like man.
Yeah.
God in man. Where is it? The Christ ideal, whose life in this world and the world beyond was typical of the ideal life of man. How many times Charles Fillmore speaks about the Christ being the ideal, the what I want to say, the presentation of the ideal man. The chief embodiments of this divinity were, of course, Osiris and his son Horus.
Yep.
Neither, however, was ever regarded as historical. A list of the names of all the gods of Egypt would fill pages, but all these gods were only forms, attributes or phases of Ra, the solar god, who himself was a supreme symbol or metaphor for God. Quote, the educated classes in Egypt never placed the gods on the same high level as the one God, and they never imagined that their views on this point would be mistaken, end quote, Budge states. Ra was undoubtedly the oldest of the gods worshipped, quote, and his name belongs to such a remote period that its full meaning is unknown. He was in all periods the visible emblem of God, says Budge. A hymn inscribed in the tomb of Seti I, 1370 BCE, reads, quote, praise be unto thee, O Rod, thou exalted power, thou one who bringest into being that which has been begotten. Behold, thy body is Horus. In other words, Horus, the son of Osiris, and Isis is himself an aspect of Ra. Indeed, Budge says, we find everywhere the attempt being made to emphasize that every god, Neter, whether foreign or native, was an aspect or form of Ra.
Yeah.
Here are some typical descriptions from the ancient text. God is one and alone, and none other is existent with him. God is the one creator who has made all things. God is a spirit, a hidden spirit, the spirit of spirits, the divine spirit. God is from the beginning. He was when nothing else had being. He shall endure to all eternity. God is truth. God is life. He liveth life to humanity, and he breatheth the breath of life into his nostrils. God is Father and Mother, the Father of fathers. He is creator of the heavens and the earth. He is the primal potter who turned men and gods into being out of his hands. That sounds like what we would teach. Is it not?
Part of my last paper was talking about the breath of God,
Yeah.
breathing into the nostrils, its spirituality. I tell you, that paper is going to either educate them or they're going to return
That's
it to me
gonna
and
be
say, would you talk
fascinating.
about something we know what's going on?
Did somebody read the next paragraph?
Yeah. There are also passages which remind me of those in Isaiah 40, where the Egyptian text says, the heavens rest upon his head, and the earth supports his feet. I am also reminded of the Psalms in the following. God is merciful unto those who reverence him, and he heareth him that calleth upon him. He protects the weak against the strong, and hears the cry of him that is bound in fetters. And in a passage reminiscent of Genesis chapter 1, we learn that the Egyptian believed in time when nothing existed, neither heaven nor earth, except for the boundless primeval water Nu, which was shrouded in thick darkness. At length the Spirit spoke the word, and creation was the result.
Let there be light.
Nu.
It's clear that at one time the Egyptian's greatest hope seems to have been that he might not only become divine, the Son of God by adoption, but that Ra would actually become his father. He or she would become the actual child of God. From the earliest period on, the Egyptian believed that Osiris was of divine origin, that he suffered betrayal, death, and mutilation at the hands of the powers of evil, that after a great struggle with these powers, he rose again. Because he had conquered death, the righteous too might conquer death. He was so exalted that he became the equal and even, at times, the superior of Ra, the sun god. At his birth into the world, a voice was heard saying, the Lord of all the earth is born. Budge notes, the worship of Osiris was so widespread and the belief in him as the god of resurrection so deeply ingrained that he represented the ideal of a person who was both God and human, and he typified to the Egyptians in all ages the being who, by reason of his suffering and death as a human, could sympathize with them in their own sickness and death. I think immediately of this passage in the Epistle to the Hebrews, quote, "For in that he himself has suffered, being tempted, he is able to help them that are tempted." Osiris was divine, yet in the myth he became a human who lived on the earth, ate, drank, and suffered a cruel death, then triumphed over death through help of the gods, Horus, and attained everlasting life. Budge adds, "But what Osiris did, they could do. And what the gods did for Osiris, they must also do for them. They, like him, would rise again and inherit life everlasting." Horus was so closely associated with Osiris that at times they are virtually interchangeable. We're reminded at this point of the Jesus of John's Gospel. He said, "I and the Father are one." Thus to Osiris this hymn was sung, "Let thy heart be content, for thy son Horus is established upon thy throne." In another line from the same hymn, we catch what seems like a forecast of Handel's Messiah. "Homage to thee, O thou King of kings, Lord of lords, and Prince of princes." What is most significant is that no matter how far back researchers go, there is no time that there did not exist a belief in the resurrection. For everywhere it is assumed that Osiris rose from the dead. Eventually, Osiris became the cause of the resurrection of the dead, and the power to bestow eternal life upon mortals was transferred from the gods to him. He who was the son of Ra became the equal of his father, and he took his place side by side with him in heaven. One is reminded of the statement of the Apostles' Creed, "And he ascended into heaven, and sitteth on the right hand of the Father." He thus became not just the equal of Ra, but, in many respects, a greater god than he. In another phase of the same complex of stories, Horus is all that Osiris was. In one litany from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it says, "Thy son Horus is triumphant. The sovereignty over the world has been given to him, and his dominion extends to the uttermost parts of the earth." Both were the God human, the being who was both divine and human. Budge writes, in Osiris later on, the Christian Egyptians found the prototype of Christ, and in the pictures and statues of Isis sucking her son, Horus, they perceived the prototype of the Virgin Mary and her child. Somewhat,
I put that in my paper too.
somewhat naively, he adds that nowhere in the world did Christianity find people whose minds were so thoroughly prepared to receive its doctrines as the Egyptians. Regarding the great goddess Isis, he argues that what appealed most to the Egyptians was her role as divine mother. In this character, thousands of statues represent her seated and suckling her child Horus, whom she holds upon her knees. In The Secret Lore of Egypt, Eric Hornung says, "There was a smooth transition from the image of the nursing Isis lactans, to that of Maria lactans, Mary, nursing her child. The miraculous birth of Jesus could be viewed as analogous to that of Horus, whom Isis conceived posthumously from Osiris, and Mary was closely connected with Isis by many other shared characteristics."
Yeah.
What you think?
Yeah, we finally got to the good stuff.
It's yeah.
Yeah. And I know it's almost like I'm reading my paper here. They're either going to like it or they'll throw me out of the university. I don't know which, but this is what and I also put in that paper about Isis and Horus and Mary and Jesus. How these are essentially spiritually the same thing. So Steve read my paper and he said, "Wow, I love it." I said, okay, got an A from Steve.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
This paper is probably going to blow their heads.
it will.
I'm going to go a little further. The Eye of Horus. You can stand up if you'd like.
I'm trying to pick up the papers that I dropped on the floor.
The Eye of Horus. For those who may be feeling that Horus, the Egyptian Christ, is some remote and obscure figure from the mists of mythical antiquity, I'd like to show that his story still touches the life of virtually every dweller on our planet, regardless of nationality, color, or clime. The Horus myth tells that he was determined to avenge his father's murder at the hands of his wicked uncle, Seth. In the battle, Horus's eye was torn out and shredded into fragments, but Thoth, who personified divine intellect and was the inspirer of laws for the ancient Egyptians, healed and restored it fully. The complete renewed eye thus came symbolically to denote wholeness, healing, and health. It was used eventually in the hieroglyphic script to represent unharmed wellness and unity. The symbol then became a mystical sign used by Galen, the famous Greek physician of the 2nd century, to impress his patients. And its pictograph gradually evolved into the shape of RX, which is today the symbol for a prescription in every country the world over, whatever the language. Have you ever closely examined an American $1 bill? There too you will see the eternal eye of Horus, Osiris, and a pyramid as well. Several of the American founding fathers, most notably George Washington, belonged to the Masonic order. The Masons base most of their inner rituals on symbols and ceremonies that originated with the building of the great pyramids of Egypt and other Egyptian esoteric lore.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of symbols on the $1 bill. And they only put them on the $1 bill. They're not on any of the
Not
other ones.
anything else.
Because they wanted everyone to be able to have one.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, this is.
So everybody's carrying around these symbols, not realizing it.
Why did I have to go 40-some years and not know this?
And
You know?
what?
And not know this.
Oh,
Nobody told me.
Nobody knew. Not anybody we knew.
And it was a funny thing. William called me one time and he mentioned Tom Harpur.
Harpur.
And he said, "Have you read?" I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "Well, I think you'd like it." So I got the book. And that had the first seeds of this.
He probably doesn't dare teach it in his church.
Oh, yeah. I think we read the quote where he said when he was teaching in seminary, he wouldn't dare have
He'd be thrown out.
said this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a joke.
Yeah.
Nobody liked. That's the joke nobody liked. About the bats in the belfry. You don't remember my story about the bats in the belfry?
I maybe didn't hear it.
Well, maybe you didn't. I don't know.
once again, maybe we'll understand it better this time.
As I wrote this, Catholic Church was having a serious problem with bats in its belfry. The senior priest knew that the Methodists down the street had experienced the same problem
Yeah.
some time ago. So the priest went to the Methodist preacher
Yeah, I
to see. Yeah,
they baptized him.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I heard
They
that.
never came back.
of course they didn't come back. They said, these people are nuts. This is not the truth, and they left.
Yeah. William laughed because he said that's exactly what happens for them. They have people come and they want to be members of the church and they baptize them and